Good morning. It's been a full morning already. Hi, Bob. Why am I shocked to see people from the Cedar Valley here at the Cedar Valley event? My name is Bob Frederick, Director of Career Services at UNI, and we're really fortunate this morning because this morning's session, and then we're going to repeat it this afternoon. This particular session is really trying to dive a little deeper into one aspect of what we're dealing with in the Cedar Valley. In particular, again, looking at the macro view, global issues associated with the world of work in the 21st century, getting down into our own ecosystem in the Cedar Valley, and now taking one strand of that, in particular looking at education. And this is really predicated on a conversation that in the development of this summit we were having, and I also in the statewide summits, about the necessity of being a lifelong learner. And the employee of the future really is going to have to spend the next 50 years always learning and upskilling and transforming their knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we've put together a panel of folks here dealing with K through 16 and beyond to talk about not only what are we doing, but where we'd like to get to. This is also meant to be a dialogue, not a monologue. And so although we've had some prepared questions to ask our panel this morning, we want you to jump in too. If you have questions and ideas or thoughts or comments or whatever, just please do that, because I think the big takeaway we're hoping for the end of this day is that these dialogues will allow us then at the last session to write down some action items, to have some takeaways that we can then apply to moving forward in this area but the other areas that you may be getting a chance to be a part of today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we're fortunate today to have Dr. Kent Johnson. He's the Dean of Continuing Education and Special Programs at UNI. We have Aaron Sauerbrot, who's the Executive Director of Business and Community Education at Hawkeye Community College. Lisa Balzaretti, who is Center Director here in Cedar Falls for the Purdue University Global. And Chris Wood, who is a school counselor at Cedar Falls High School, and he's a part of the Center for Advanced Professional Studies, and he's a liaison for that. And then myself. And again, we're hoping to lay out some things here, maybe challenge ourselves a little bit, but hopefully you'll challenge us as well with the questions you may have. And with that, let's start off with with a question. With respect to the 21st century world of work, what are trends that you are seeing as education providers? Aaron, let's start with you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I feel like I should have a Corona here with my barstool. Just some of the basic trends that we see at Hawkeye Community College. Our labor pool is so diverse that we need to have flexibility and a lot of different opportunities for the folks we serve. Not everyone is going to come out of high school and go directly into a 2-year program, go directly into a 4-year program. That's why we at Hawkeye, we've spent a lot of time building those short-term training programs that can upskill somebody to get into the workforce, and then we work with employers to help them continue to build those skills to help them progress through employment. So if I had to say one trend, is that we need to, as educators, quit trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. We need to provide different alternative opportunities, whether it be a registered apprenticeship program that will help people earn and learn at the same time, or if it is in somebody's best interest to go into a 2-year or 4-year program, to lead them in the right way. But we need to do a much better job in front of them.
I'm just going to catch you up on what we've been doing lately. We've created a document.
They cut me off already.
Is that the Oscar cue?
Opportunities for kids that they're just not exposed to, and yet we know that it's going to help them grow. It's going to provide them with opportunities that the world
So you yell over
asking of them in a very
the
short
voices
amount
in
of
the
time.
sky.
Big North's just been a very influential.
We need to do a
part
better job of
schools in
assessing
my life.
who we're working
All
with on an
businesses have
individual
problems, and many
level,
times you get to
like they were
maybe
talking
number 1,
with
number
the
2,
team.
number 3,
So
but by the time you
with
get to
that,
4, 5, or 6, you've run out of resources, and sometimes that's
Should I even try? Can you hear me all right?
Can provide you with some people.
Kind of? All right, we'll pick up what I hear, and then we'll go back over it.
Problem that you're having.
I'm in a unique situation. To many of you, you haven't been in high school for a while. So to kind of follow up, I think it's important that we diversify the educational experience, which I think in the Cedar Valley and the surrounding areas, we're doing really well. I think there's always room for improvement, but I do. Okay. I think one of the
Basically, they want us to display
I think one of the things
something.
that for us in the Cedar Falls area that we're trying to do is to focus on providing our students an opportunity to see what is out there. I use this with my parents, my students all the time, telling them that if you step back into your high school shoes and I would ask you all to raise your hand if you knew that you would be in this exact position today, there's not many of you that are going to raise your hands. To our high school students, to ask them to say, what do you want to do with your lives when you're 17 years old, is a challenging question. Most of the time because they've been exposed to, if they're lucky, 3 different opportunities. Teachers as career opportunities, and what maybe both their parents have done. Outside of that, they don't know what anybody else does.
Because of big,
So
we find
trying to
things
provide
that
our
you're really
students to
passionate
be
about, the things that you
exposed
can
to
excel
some of those
at,
different
rather than
college
staying in
and
your
career
box
options
that you're taught in
is
school.
increasingly
You get
important for
the
them
whole
to be
world,
able to even
pretty much, you know.
identify what's possible for them. Just did that for you.
You ended on the beautiful note.
Yeah, right.
Lovely.
Why,
So,
thank you.
Perfect.
My perspective is a little bit different in terms of that I worked with an online institution. So Purdue University Global is online other than the RN program. What we see coming to us and the requests that we have from students, they really want to work in an online environment, but we really deal in 2 very distinct populations. One population is still that population we see trying to lift themselves out of poverty. They have not had success in school. They have to work. They have families, single mothers, those kinds of things. That is a different clientele for online and a much more difficult clientele for online. They don't always have the skill set to be successful, so we deal in that. We also see the students that are post-baccalaureate certificates. They need to continue their education. They need to continue to do more, and they are working full-time and have to have that flexibility. So we have a lot of requests, and we're seeing trends for competency-based education. So I would say those are primarily the 2 things we're seeing the most from my perspective.
Okay, good, thank you.
Well, I'll go a little bit different direction here, and that's think more broadly, or my comments will be more broad. The world of work, what are the trends more globally? I heard Dr. Walpart this morning mention thinking about things from an ecosystem. So one of the trends that I think we can all appreciate, the digital workplace. So how do we prepare students, regardless of where they're entering the continuum, to enter this digital workplace? I would imagine, let me engage you a little bit, how many people have accessed work today through their cell phone?
Yeah.
So most people are logging in. So that's a trend, obviously, that's not going to be turned back. The folks that are in the pipeline, that are in the K-12 system, obviously, are doing iPad. My wife teaches kindergarten. Kindergartners are on iPads. So, you know, how do we, as educational institutions, prepare our students knowing that that's in place? So, multi-generational workplace, that was mentioned, I think, in one of the sessions this morning. We've got you know, the baby boomers. I'm sadly part of that, reaching the end of that road. Hopefully not the end of the road, but you know what I mean. But millennials, Generation Z. You know, how as employers and educational institutions do we respond to that diversity within the workforce? So it's another challenge that I think everyone faces. Just generally the pace of work. I think in my career, and most of us that have been working for any period of time, have seen the pace of work related to that digital workplace just continue to increase. What implications does that have on the way that we design educational programs, competing demands, barriers, concentration, that we can concentrate? Certainly another trend, I think, that's not going to, the clock's not going to turn that back.
So I'm not sure this is even working so well. With respect to that, so how does the shift of lifelong learning then as a necessity for all employees in the future, how does that affect what you deliver and how you deliver it? And Ken, I'm going to start with you again, just thinking about what you deliver, but how you deliver it. How does it affect that?
Well, I think we're all here because we're lifelong learners, and I think everyone accepts the premise that to be successful in the workplace of the future, people have to be lifelong learners. So the question for educational institutions is how do we create the environment to foster that orientation and build that capacity to be a lifelong learner? So I'll just focus on one aspect. Let's build opportunities for students to be successful. Success reinforces itself. It provides that positive sense of efficacy for any individual. So a successful learning experience and designing successful learning experiences is one of the strategies, I think, for institutions, and I know our institutions in the Cedar Valley are oriented towards that, but being intentional about creating those environments where people can succeed, whether it's an online course, face-to-face course, apprenticeship, whatever that is, that feeling of success and removing barriers that prevent that, I think it's a really important strategy.
Lisa?
Working in the idea of the competency base, for us, it's a very niche market at this point in terms of we require students to have a certain level of career development already in place. This isn't for a student fresh out of high school. This would be for example, a student who wants to get their master's in nursing or their bachelor's in nursing. We've been in RN for a while. This allows them that flexibility to work and to go through, competency-based education allows you to get through things you already know without having to spend a lot of time on the things you already know. Focus your attention on the things that you need to know and really tailor your education individually to you. So that trend is really, really important, I think, for people if they have to continue to educate themselves through the workforce, to have those opportunities to go, I need this certificate, I need this further degree, and I can tailor it and individualize it at my pace. It makes it easier for them to get the degree. It makes it easier for them to deal with it. I would also suggest that there has to be the other side of it, and that is the businesses. The businesses have to turn around and go, you get a benefit by continuing your education. I think we can get lost. I know I get lost in my own job sometimes of, we've got to meet goals, we've got to get this, we've got to go here, and my own personal development can get put on the side. Because if there isn't an incentive for me to have that personal development for a lot of our employees, lifelong learning is, hey, I've got the job. Now I just have to meet my sales goal and then I'll be fine. That isn't conducive to a long-term career, not anymore. And so I think that businesses have to turn around and say, what do you get if you continue to get another certificate, or you get another degree, or you take this training course, or you become a professional IT, whatever. Those kinds of things are really important.
So Chris, we're putting you on the spot representing all of K-12.
And you can
But
do it.
if you think about what you deliver and how you deliver it, what's your perspective on that with K-12?
I think since even many of us were in school, the language or the lingo among what do we do after high school has changed. There was a time when it was straight into receiving some kind of trade or education into that field. There was a select number of individuals that were reserved to continue on with college and career, with college. We have to shift, or we've started to shift at least, what that language with a high school student and families looks like. It can't, because we encompass such a large conversation with K-12 or 9, 12, 10, 12, it can't just be college-going culture or career-going culture. We have to, and I just want to make sure to preface this in terms of how we use our language as post-secondary education. So when I talk to students, whether that's a freshman or a senior, what are we doing post-secondary? And I want that to entail everything, because regardless of what you do, graduating from high school is no longer an option. That is a requirement. We have to get you there. And our students have really embodied that to know that this is where we're going to be. What we've started this year is we've started to look at, okay, what does post-secondary look like? And what we framed that, or the initiative that we've taken in our district, is what's your graduation story? So when a student is, and we tell students, when you walk across the stage and you have all your grandparents and you've got your diploma and you're taking all your fancy pictures and everybody's asking you the questions, what's next? What are you going to do? We don't want you to be able just to say, I think I'm going off to Hawkeye, or I think I'm going to go to Iowa State. I don't really know exactly what I want to do. we've started to shift that as, what is your ambition? What do you have passion and purpose in doing? That could be something as small as, I have a desire to help people. Well, we can find you a career or a calling within that field. What we've tried to avoid is those students that are telling us what we want to hear, which, if you have teenagers, you know that they're really good at that. That when we get to the end of the 4 years with us, and we know that we're providing them the next step. We've given them the tools to be able to do that, but to what extent are they confident in doing that? And so when they are ready to take that next stage, do we feel confident as an institution or as a district that we've provided them everything they need to be confident in that next step? They're certainly going to take steps backwards, we all do, but are they ready to take that leap of faith and be confident in doing so? I think it's so important, the numbers and the statistics that they pointed out, that Iowa's graduation rate is not something that we have to worry about. It's great, but we have to start asking ourselves, are we responsible as K-12 educators for what they do after they leave our building? Can we look at them 4 years down the road, and are they a byproduct of what we want our students to be, which in our district is a lifelong learner? Just because they leave our district and tell us that they're intending to enroll somewhere doesn't always mean that they actually enroll there. That's what we call intentioned enrollment data. And so if we can start to change that conversation between, we want you to go off to college, or we want you to go to a 4-year degree, to we want you to have some kind of education or training post-high school, whether that be a 1-week apprentice program or a certificate program, something that they can feel passionate and purpose about. And we've only been able to do that with the help and support of community members, because we can't bridge that gap. I love my job, but I can't know every single career and opportunity that's available in the Cedar Valley. It's near impossible, especially as much as we shift and jobs change. So we have to be able to welcome and open our doors to be able to have those people come in and talk to our students, to expose them. If you couldn't hear me over before, most of our students have no idea what's available to them in the Cedar Valley. There is opportunity to stay here, but as a teenager, your first thing is, get me out of here. But if they are going to get out, let's expose them to what they can come back to, because there is a lot of opportunity for that.
Can I say, hearing what you're saying, I think, and we're a little older, and I remember graduating from high school, the mindset was always, and we still have to fight it, you're either going to go to college or you're going to go do vocational. You're either going to be a white-collar worker, make good money, be in an office, or you're going to be a plumber. And the choices, we've got to get away from that mindset. And employers have to help us get away from that mindset by showing all the steps in between there. And I think we get lost in it's either or. And that's where we've got to really shift our culture. You hear it now, even on the media and all. It's just either or. Can't do it.
It's interesting because the Greater Cedar Valley Alliance and Chamber survey we just recently completed this past summer, one of the outcomes of that was we don't tell our story about what's available in the Cedar Valley very well to all audiences. And so there is that interesting dynamic of identification of we don't actually know what's available. Even those of us who work here, when I ask college students this, they can list about 10 organizations in the Cedar Valley, and then they don't know the rest. Not the 197 that exist in our industrial park here at Cedar Falls. They can list 10. So, Aaron, what about you? As far as when we're talking about what you deliver and how you deliver, how's that transformative?
I think the entire language needs to change, and Chris is alluding to this. If I could put a Chris in every school district in our Cedar Valley, that'd be great, because it starts with the parents, number one. You're right, Lisa. It's not an either-or track for people. We need to change just the definitions of the terms we use. When we say, my son last year graduated from 8th grade. It was an 8th grade graduation. Okay, what does that mean? Graduate means finality, isn't it? And okay, you graduate from high school. Okay, it's finality. But there is no finality in today's workforce. There is none. Even if you graduate with a PhD, there's no finality. You have to continue to build your skills portfolio 5 years ahead of time of where you need to be. And that's what I try to embed in my kids as a parent. And I think we need to do that like Chris is doing in his role at the schools, from the time they're this tall, so we don't try to catch them too late in life where they're just have that mentality, I'm graduating from high school, I'm getting a job, and I'm done. because it just doesn't work that way nowadays, because we do business training for companies, and they have us come in and teach new skills, and yeah, you can tell the people that really love to learn, that they've grown up and they love it, but some people, it's just, oh gosh, we gotta learn. You know, so that mentality has to change, that it just needs to be an expectation that you're gonna continue to learn. And with those expectations, you have to have different options available. Lisa talks about online portions of training that you have to be able to meet the different needs of people, but to me, it's just an entire culture change.
And I would say from my perspective in running a career office, you know, I get to work with around 5,000 employers in total, and hearing from them has been really powerful, because what they're really saying is we need students who know how to learn. So that becomes a discussion in what we deliver and how we deliver it, of in the K through 16 vertically articulated curriculum process, are we fundamentally focusing on learning how to learn? And it's not about learning a thing or a date or a fact. It's about the actual process of learning how to learn, so that when you get done with some point in your education, you're still utilizing that skill set, that ability to find information, which has never been easier. Information can be Googled, right? We can find information, but how do you make sense of it? How do you analyze it? How do you to discern, right? So, for those of you who graduated from college a long time ago, right? Remember when logic was required? It was a required course. You had to take a logic class. So you had to understand if-then statements and syllogisms, and how do you make sense of either circular arguments or straw man arguments. And so when I hear things on the television, which I rarely watch, but you say that's a terribly constructed argument. And my kids are like, what do you mean, right? So that idea of learning how to learn and then being able to do the application of that is so fundamentally important. And all the literature I've been reviewing over the past couple of years, as we started talking about Future Ready Iowa, it's not a question mark about it. It is a necessity that we do this through the entire continuum, starting in lower elementary school.
I just wanted to add on the national Future Ready conversation, there's one of the subsets is Future Ready Librarians, which hasn't been a big part of the Iowa Future Ready conversations, but when you're talking about information literacy, you're talking about how to learn. I have to throw that in there.
No, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Because I wish that there were more of that sort of lifelong learning continuum across.
I think we're doing a disservice in a lot of educational, and I will chastise Purdue Global on this even, to say that as we address online learning, we tend to go, here are these great EBSCO hosts, these are these great databases. They don't have the impact of the librarian on learning.
Well, they need to know how to use the databases.
Right.
Yes.
Who's creating them? Where does this stuff even come from? It didn't come out of the air.
And we are losing track of, in some of the more innovations we're doing, we're losing track of information literacy unless we're integrating it into a lot of different courses, which is not easy to do. It has to be a focal point in education today to teach students how to deal in this electronic world of information.
Thank you.
Information literacy, I love it. I think that's a very important thing to bring up.
I just had to ask this question for the group. You talk about lifelong learning. It's a key piece to growing the economy and having a skilled workforce. But I haven't heard much about what it costs today to continue in that effort. What we've seen at the state level is funding for programs haven't been, particularly in the community colleges and then our region schools. So I don't want to make this the conversation for the day, but my sense is we're not funding education appropriately, whether it's K-12 or post-secondary. So that's.
Can I speak to that really quick? I can't speak from the political side of how much money. I'd love to have more money. I think everybody would. I love what Dr. Petit, our superintendent, says is when we're talking about our CAPS program, we're not looking for handouts, we're looking for handshakes. And one of the most important things that we are able to do with our CAPS students, which has grown from 30 in our first semester a year and a half ago to 160 right now students we have going through that, is our first 4 weeks is dedicated to some of those things that we take for granted, that although we assume that teenagers like this is a second or third hand for them, and it is technology. We assume that they just know exactly what they're doing, right? And what they don't. I mean, so those first 4 weeks are dedicated to soft skills, LinkedIn profiles, email communications, email signatures, things that we take for granted. And a lot of the time, funding would be great for those programs, but we're looking for community members to say, we would love to dedicate our time and energy to be able to help you engage your students and what that looks like in a workplace setting. And so funding-wise for us, I think money's great, but that's so far out of my department or my role's reach that we're always looking for students or professionals to be able to come in and provide some of that one-on-one specific training with them. And that's just as valuable as money is for me. But Bob, I love your question about how that comes about in terms of financing it.
I'll take it from kind of another perspective, and the one we always do with is the student debt perspective. Okay, because we know going to school, it costs a lot of money now. And that's why it's so important, in my view, that we've got to work with students much more carefully on where they want to go and get them in the right places. I'll give you a really great example. We get a lot of students that come to us and go, I'm going to be a nurse, I want to be a nurse, I have to be a nurse, I've got to be a nurse. And you're like, whoa, let's stop. Not everybody is qualified to be a nurse, not everybody should be a nurse. How do you know you want to be a nurse? For some of these students, what we find is that they're better off starting off as a medical assistant. And they go into a program that costs less, has more impact, helps lift themselves out of some of their, what I would call their financial need. Because what they need is a steady job. What they need is some skilled work. Then they can spend some time in that profession and go, do I want to be a nurse? Or do I want to be a healthcare administrator? And we have had students who I've said, no, let's start with MA. A little less debt, not quite sure. Then we travel through it, and they have not become nurses, and they have found better professions. We've got to get that way, and the way we're going to get there is working with high schools, and also working with employers and having employers speak to students more about what are progressions in a career. It doesn't have to be $30,000 of debt right out the door for somebody who has low financial means anyway. Does make sense?
Well, no, go ahead, Ken.
Well, it is a complicated thing to help guide students in that
Yep.
decision-making process. And the stats, and Bob will correct me, or there's different stats about how many times people change their careers. About 12 times, I think, plus or minus. So how do we prepare people for the long term?
Yep.
Well, that's back to the basics of critical thinking, problem solving, communication, information literacy, and that has to start at a young age. And there's no magic formula to it. It's hard work. So one of the real challenges here, a barrier, I suppose, is trying to instill that idea early on that learning is hard. It takes concentration, it takes time, and we're challenged by that time with distractions, noise, overload, information overload. So yeah, I think the stat is about out of 100 students who start a bachelor's degree, 22 leave the system without any degree whatsoever. So how do we move the needle? How do we improve that? A lot of tough issues there, but step one, identify what those problems are, and then let's have forums like this and talk about ways that we can improve.
I have an example for you, Bob. University of Washington recently did a comprehensive survey of Washington State, Seattle area, and so on, and what they were surveying were employers. And they realized that there was some specific needs when they themed out the data that they received back, right? They actually themed it out to land on 3 specific programs that were desirous of the employment base to deal with helping people upskill. Cost was an issue that was told by the employers. Timeliness, delivery model was an issue, again, told by the employers. What they did is they have a College of Continuum, which is their equivalent to distance and continuing yet. They just call it the College of Continuum. They ramped up these 3 programs. They made it easy on, easy off ramps, and they made it a fixed cost, $3,500. The employers paid for it. Because the certification they were getting was exactly, one of them was business analytics, for example, was exactly what they wanted. They wanted it easy, fairly short in time, and for a fixed cost so it wouldn't be onerous on the student side of things. And then once they delivered it, the employer said, hey, we'd love to pay for that. Let's get them signed up. And it's booming for them, right? So there are ways to partnership-wise, as everyone has here said, partnering, so it's not just that's education's responsibility. When I hear an employer say, you guys aren't doing enough to help, get these people in the door, the right employees with the right skill sets. Well, it's both of us, it's not us, it's both. But that includes how we resource it, how we drive it forward, how we have the conversation. That's why things like this summit, I think, are awesome. I hope it doesn't end today. That's what my biggest fear would be. Because I think the greatest thing that could happen would be more of these tripart, partnerships with community and community organizations, education and business together solving these problems. Somebody had a question over here.
I would kick myself if I didn't answer Bob's question.
Oh, I agree.
As a community college, we're funded from 3 different areas. We have local support, we have state support, and then we have tuition funding. We are limited in the amount of local support that we can levy in the form of taxes. So a bulk of our revenue, or what we use to operate, is from state aid and from tuition. We have seen a steady amount of state, so as you know, in any business, your expenses go up every year. So we have had to raise tuition, and it's making it harder for our students. So obviously, would we want more money? Absolutely, Bob, we do want more money. But I think you're right. I think the panel's right. We have to look at other ways to do things in partnerships with our business partners. And I think we're seeing an upsurge in registered apprenticeships right now here in the Cedar Valley, and particularly in the skilled trades areas. But now we're getting into the healthcare field as well, where, as a community college provides the in-class training, then the employer provides the on-the-job training. That's a partnership that really works. And I think we need to look at more unique ways to fund training for upskilling people, because like I said before, this is a lifelong thing. This isn't going to just stop at a certain point. So, Bob, I do want to mention 3 programs that are instrumental for our students, and that's the GAP program, that's the PACE program, and that's the Workforce Training and Economic Development Fund training. Those money go directly to our students to help them afford support services, tuition, book and fees, all the wraparound services that help people be successful. So I did want to say that thank you for those. Those are special legislative funds that we really impact our students.
Does somebody have a question over here?
I was,
Or a comment or anything?
yeah, for the sake of context, I'm a central office administrator at Waverly Shell Rock School District, so largely suburban population. And I would say that one of the barriers we face is the assumptions of parents. So in many cases, we have parents who came through a very traditional system that really worked quite well for them. And so while we can work with students to have their graduation story, many of them are carrying the weight of their parents' expectations and their parents' story for them. So Waverly is a community that has many, many unfilled high-quality jobs. We're not sending very many of our own students into those jobs because they are, a barrier is how to get parents to change their paradigm, to change their assumptions. And I'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts.
No, that's what Butch was telling us too with GMT. I mean, they've got such great opportunities up there. It's in Waverly. They're going to have all this turnover, and yet they can't get people to walk in the door to fill out an application, which is a one-pager, by the way. So yeah, why is that? I think we've talked about it already. It's a mindset, it's a cultural thing, it's maybe the language we use, it's the words how we describe things to young people.
It is, and there's a statewide effort. How many of you are familiar with Elevate Iowa, Association of Business and Industries involved? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
Director Townsend's back there. Yeah, I think it's initiatives like that we may not see, short-term results, but I think over time it's going to. And I think the more and more kids that we get into the plants, a lot of manufacturing plants are opening their doors to bring kids in. It changes the entire mindset, because I think Butch said it great, is that this isn't the manufacturing of 40 years ago. It's clean. You can eat off the floor compared to the way it was. So it's just, and parents haven't had that chance to really keep up to date with where things are going. So it's going to be a process.
I would be remiss to say, because I maybe kind of sidetracked Bob's question, but because I didn't want to directly go down that. Sorry, are you used to that, Bob? Is that without the funding, because the employers are starting to be able to see the benefit of working with school districts and putting in that effort, but until the education side of it has the ability to provide the opportunity for someone to make those connections and open the doors, it's a challenge. Because we're, and I don't mean to jump on my soapbox, but we have pretty good ratios at Cedar Falls, where we have 4 school counselors for 1,200 students, that our services are expected to be social, emotional, mental health, academic guidance, scheduling to make sure on the right path, and then throw in that other small thing called college and career planning. And we do that for 1,200 students, for 4 of us. And so when we're starting to think about, and I'm coming from the college admissions side, so my passion and purpose is there to try and find a way to bridge that gap for students without someone in that role specifically dedicated to helping students find what Bob does at the college level. We are severely underserving our K through 16 or K through 12 student population. And you talk about how can we provide direct relations with those community members that have services. If there was a specific role at every single high school, what would that look and how different would that look to be able to connect those people?
And that would take funding to do that.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
So to quote Monty Python, you're lucky. We have 6 counselors for 11,000 students. I'm going to put my ratio up against you. So I'm going to ask some harder questions, and you can ask hard questions of us as well. Yeah, Beth, please.
Particular subject. So one of the things that we are doing right now to connect businesses with high school kids is the work-based learning clearinghouse is in the process of being developed. And while that isn't going to be a specific individual at each school, it should provide much easier contact and access between businesses, not just locally, but also statewide. And we're hoping to have virtual projects posted so that if you live in this area and there's a Des Moines employer, you can do all of that stuff virtually. So that's one thing that we're working on. It's supposed to go live, I believe, in July. So that'll be helpful.
And just to piggyback on that too, if you're not aware, in this region, we do have workforce intermediaries that play a role to link businesses and educators. Yep. And so if you don't know who that is in your area, please let me know and I'll hook you up with that person, because the more kids and parents we get into these facilities to learn what's going on locally, the better.
The Cedar Valley Career Connections, which is housed at Hawkeye, Kelly Kabliska is our representative, have just been unbelievable. We have this semester alone, we started this 3 years ago. We started with 30 students going on a job shadow effort, and I think this semester alone at Cedar Falls we have over 300 students going out on job shadows. And that is directly because employers are willing to take teenagers into their day for a half a day, which isn't always easy. And so that's funded from the state, and that organization has been tremendous for us in terms of students. We had a student at Grundy County Memorial Hospital that came back last week, or 2 weeks ago. She was interested in being a surgeon, which everybody's interested in healthcare to some extent at the high school level, until you put them in an actual surgery and hold a hip bone from a hip replacement. And she came back, one of the ones that didn't faint in the surgery room, and said, this is what I want to do with my life. And the passion and the purpose to what she's doing now, to where she's going to start looking for schools post-secondary, is tremendous. I mean, that small, tiny little thing in this 2 hours that she spent make the world of difference for a student.
Questions you have yet? Yes, ma'am.
One of the things I think the issue is that we, on the credit side of institutions, we are held accountable to completion rates.
Right.
And funding that matters on that, and we're saying it's wonderful, and I agree with this. We need to know what students' goals are. We're not rewarded in any way for students who meet their goals. Not the end of the degree, because a lot of employers are hiring our students before they graduate.
Right.
So that then makes our completion rates look bad. I'm at Hawkeye, and I'm thinking, our funding structure in education, just above nationwide, does not, it doesn't suit the idea of individual goals and completing, because if somebody gets a job, and they're happy and their life moves on, why would we want them to stay in college and complete, and then we want them to come back? up. And I think, and so we're really trying to balance that idea at Hawkeye about, you know, you can finish your degree or your certificate, or you can do something, but we know that eventually you're gonna come back for some more education. But in the first step, we're punished that they didn't finish that degree.
That's true.
So I think some of that also has to be thought about if we truly are trying to meet the needs of employers, what's needed in the community, and then what students need.
It's a huge issue. In fact, 2 months ago or so, there was a really great article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed that dealt with that very issue, which is, are we still going to use a 19th century model for the higher education in a 21st century environment, you know? And so things that they were addressing were things like even credit hours. Does that have meaning? You know, a certain number of days, weeks, months, or time in this seat, does that matter? You know, I mean, the credentialing process itself, as you said, if their student learning outcome for that particular individual is to achieve a job, and they take 4 classes at Hawkeye and learn how to do welding with aluminum and they get a job, didn't they meet an outcome? And yeah, I think, you know, and we don't have answers to that yet, but at least it's the conversation is becoming a national conversation, and I think it's about time. I think it's a good thing.
So can I weigh on that one?
Yeah.
So, Future Ready Iowa goals are going to be based on labor shed information. We have modified the way we do labor shed studies starting this last January to tease out exactly the information and the situation where you're talking about, where people have some college, they have learned a skill, it has resulted in an increase in their income and in their earning capacity. Those individuals would be counted as upskilled in terms of the Future Ready Iowa goal, because we recognize if you went to college or to a training program and you learned a skill that resulted in an increased earning capacity, that's the end goal. It's not the piece of paper that says you have a credential. It's the skills that result in tangible earning increases. So that in terms of the Future Ready Iowa goal, that information is actually going to be tracked and counted.
And that's fine, but our students all, I mean, primarily are financial aid and Pell recipients. So while Future Ready Iowa can say that good job, people are, if they can't afford to come to college because we don't have financial aid for them, they're not even going to start in that path.
It's our institutional issues. It's the accrediting bodies. It's how we're all being held. It's I have to meet iPads. It's I have to do all these things, and that's great. That has to shift in this. We're shifting locally, but we're not shifting in the general overarching scheme of things, and it's difficult.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind for Future Ready Iowa, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but this is so.
It's an open forum,
Okay, good. So the thing to keep in mind with Future Ready Iowa is the largest group of people that we have to educate are adults. If you look at the breakdown of 127,000 that need to be upskilled, we've got to find those 51,000 adults who don't have any type of post-secondary training or education. We've got to get them into our schools, and we've got to get them to completion. So part of what we need to be focusing on, it's great to focus on the high school kids, but they're actually going to be a smaller contingent of the group. That it's those low-skilled adults that we really need to figure out how to find and get them into the programs that we have.
I agree that they still need financial aid too.
Well, and the last dollar scholarship, well, if they're not full Pell eligible, the last dollar scholarship would actually pay for the difference between community college tuition and fees and the cost of the program. So that would really help the adults who probably are not at the poverty level and may not be full Pell eligible. And so you're right, they need some financial incentives. So the last dollar scholarship is designed to provide them with that, so that the community college wouldn't cost them anything.
So that brings up two of our questions here. And one of them is, you know, what role does apprenticeship play then? I think, Aaron, you can talk a little about that. But also this idea of, if the non-traditional student, are we at a place where we could be looking at college a la carte? And what would that look like? How would we do that? Where it's really about maybe not a full degree program, but a selective process of upskilling for individuals who are non-traditionals. Maybe they don't need they're not going to stop out. That's one thing we know they're not going to do. But how do we help them with that? So those two things kind of come out of this general conversation. Aaron, you want to push the apprenticeship conversation a little bit.
Sure. You know, one thing that Luke said that was really interesting to me is, you know, for years, people in state running a CNC machine, they had to have a certain level of math, where it's like, where did that number come from? Well, after talking to employers, they figured out that they didn't need to have this level of math to get a job at that employer. I guess where I'm going with this is we need to be having conversation as educators with those employers to figure out what do you need to get them in your door, and then how do we help them move from entry level to a high level in your business. And there's many ways to do that. And like I mentioned before, one of the more popular ways now with our skilled trades is the apprenticeship program. Kids, adults, doesn't matter. They walk into an employer, they find that that person is willing to learn and work hard. That, for the most part, the employers are paying the education portion of it, and they're earning income at the same time working with a mentor at that facility. And to me, that's an investment that the employers are willing to make, and it pays off not only for the employers, but also for the student, because what happens for the student, they walk away from a job, they have very to little or virtually no debt attached to them. And what we're doing now is we're actually going to be articulating that, so if they do have some of those courses, they will articulate if they do want to go into a 2-year or 4-year program. So I think it's important that we set up pathways for kids, but more than anything, we have to be talking to the employers to figure out, what do you need? Do you need an 8th grade applied math level? Do you need a 2 years of college under your belt? We need to challenge those assumptions, because a lot of times, us as educators, we're wrong. And we need to really, in what we do from Hawkeye, we have on our credit enrollment side, we have advisory councils. On our non-credit role, we have sector boards where we invite employers in, where we get feedback from them as to what we're doing right now, and more importantly, where do we go in the future.
With respect then to college a la carte, our college providers here, I mean, it comes up, but what does that look like? What does it even mean? It's been put out there in the literature, so.
It has, and structures and systems, and our structures and systems in higher education haven't been particularly nimble when it comes to this. Financial aid, for example. So if students move among institutions, what's that mean for financial aid? It can be a real barrier or perceived barrier. The coherence of the curriculum. So, you know, traditionally colleges have operated as if students will maybe start at a community college, transfer, not a lot of mobility among universities for sure. So is the curriculum under a model where we say, you know, we're really just interested in what students can know and what they can do. So, you know, grab some courses here, grab some courses here, and we're going to put something together. Is that a coherent curriculum? We have accreditation requirements that are really, let's just say they haven't become less important in terms of our daily work. So there's a reality here in the current state.
Carefully said.
We're on tape, so I want to be careful. You know, there's a reality of the current state, and one of the questions is, you know, what does it make sense to move in a more flexible model, and what would that model look like, and what we have to change in systems and structures to allow that to happen. I'm going to say it's pretty tough for students right now to pick a la carte and choose and pick. And one of the other elements of that, there's a temptation there with that kind of model. Let's take a semester off, and I'm going to do this and pursue that. Students who stop out do not persist at the same rate as students who continue on a path. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
I think it might depend too on what you define. I think it depends too if you hang that definition on college. Is it college a la carte, or is it something else a la carte?
Yeah.
We talk about nano degrees and micro credentials and anything from badging to whatever.
Yep.
It's about, you know, the skill set, and in some ways more like competency-based education, you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, but if we're limited by credit, and we define college as only credit, that does put us in a box and try to get out of it.
You know, the IT industry has really proven that you can be very successful successful in an industry without having a college degree. I mean, truly, I was in that system, the certificate system where you go and you study for a test, you pass the test. There's a little bit of a difference, and I'm always careful. The people that I worked with and I was involved with, they also go home and the ones that were most successful have a passion for it. It isn't that they got a Network Plus certificate and all of a sudden they got a great job. They were home with their 6 computers day in, day out. They had this passion for the area. So we have to be careful saying that model is the perfect model. It's not necessarily the perfect model. I also, cobbling it together, like we're talking about, very hard to do, but I think that if universities would be the place to start having those, the community colleges and universities, we don't have to just be what we are. We can try to be more than what we are. I mean, it can be a place you go to UNI to get your 4-year degree. Why can't I get a few certificates there and do the same thing eventually? UNI could provide that.
It's interesting because when we look at the data from our registrar's office, it's amazing, maybe it's not amazing, how many people have more than one institution on their transcript, right? Because they took concurrent enrollment in high school somewhere. 84% of urban kids, 91% of rural kids take concurrent enrollment classes. They already took college, some college in high school, right? Then they go on and they go to a 2-year or 4-year, and then at some point they grab some more, so Hawkeye's a great example. We'll have people come to UNI and they'll pick up a few classes at Hawkeye. So when they get done, they have DMAC credit, they have Hawkeye credit, and they have UNI credit, and that's not unusual. So this asymmetrical, nonlinear pathway to their own personal success, it already exists. What are we doing to facilitate those pathways, And I talked to Butch up in Waverly, by the way, and they'll take people in their apprenticeship program who know nothing about CNC. And in 4 years, they become a journeyman, which is a national recognition to go anywhere and do CNC machining, right? Or IT is another one. And Aaron, you know this, there's apprenticeships for IT now, right? So it's not just, I'm going to become a plumber or an electrician, right? There's a lot more pathways opening up. So then how do we as education partners then come alongside? Because what they do need, though, and this is true of the businesses I usually visit, we do about 100 employer visits a year out of my office, and they don't necessarily, the businesses out there in the world, have development and training programs. They want us to be a part of that conversation. So what are we doing to be a part of that conversation? Some colleges, like our College of Ed, the dean's sitting right here, and Leslie's here, they have more intimate connectivity with business and industries. We've got 4 other colleges, right?
I'm
And they
business,
connect.
just so you know, I'm College of Business.
Yeah, College of Business. Yeah, I'm just saying, you're so close. I mean, you with intentionality create those connectivities. So how do we get the rest of us to think like that? I don't mean just 4-year, by the way. I'm talking K through 16. How do we get the rest of us to think like that? That connectivity, that surveying, that ability to break down barriers with if it's the cost of education. If you want a new employee to come in with certain skill sets, what are you doing to invest in that? As an employer. And that's a harder question, right? I mean, that's one of our questions that we ask. How do employers foster lifelong learning? So it can't just be us as educators, right? What are they doing so that that we are together helping in it? Our focus today is obviously the Cedar Valley. I think, fortunately, and Beth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're ahead of the game. I think Cedar Valley is doing a great job with this. From the beginning of this summit conversation till today, in many ways we are out in front, and that's great. But we're not done by a long shot. So how do we get to that next level? And that's hopefully what will come out of our last session today. But I'll ask you another hard question.
Can I just comment real quick?
Yeah, please do.
In this conversation too, and I know that there are other areas that are covering the future workforce, but when we talk about education, and we start with K, we must understand, and I come from the early childhood world, so I'm talking about brain development.
Absolutely.
Quality early childhood education in Iowa is lacking. We know this, we actually have a lack of child care. So I think we always need to open up that conversation and not just start with K. We need to think of birth through 5. And we're not talking about a lack of child care here, we're talking about quality child care.
Absolutely.
Because if they approach kindergarten and they don't know the social emotional skills, which they should be learning, birth through 5, they're not ready to learn anything else. And so you can have a child that can do their 1, 2, 3s and whatever, and then you can guide them all the way through post-secondary education, but if they don't have those basics, and we're talking about communication, all those things, we always need to remember as employees, as employers, as community, it starts birth through 5.
One of the
So
top
I'm just
4 barriers identified in the Cedar Valley, for this whole thing, one of the top 4 barriers was childcare. Quality,
Yeah.
not just, someplace to park a kid. So
Yeah.
you're exactly right, that's 100%.
So I just wanted to comment really quick, because I believe in everything you guys are saying, but just as we
Yeah.
remember, as the conversation continues, that
Absolutely.
it needs to start with the brain when it's developing the most important parts.
That could almost be one of those reminders that they were talking about. You had 6 things that the percentage of people without a quality early childhood education, some of those things just fall in line automatically. You're set behind the 8 ball so much that you don't have that. So I appreciate that comment.
As a former K principal, I'm on board with that. I'm there.
I was just gonna say then, I just wanted to hype and real quick, or I won't
Awesome,
do my-
thank you for sharing, that's
But
important.
it is important for people to understand, for the broader community, to really understand the double-sided value of that, which is what I think she's saying, which is, it's often, childcare is often seen as a barrier because people need daycare, is basically what they equate that to. But it's equally important to not only allow, and many times a single parent or someone to work so that they have reliable childcare, but it's that early childhood development, which is
What's happening in
preparing
that
the
time?
next generation to have that, really that advantage, as you said. It is a huge advantage to go through a developmental.
Because they're not little objects you're setting there to just be watched and taken care of, right? Like, there's actually things
But
happening.
it's one of those places where that kind of investment, you're really serving, both populations. You're serving the adult workers that need to skill up, but you're preparing the next generation. It's really undervalued in our society.
So at the end, we're going to ask for barriers, right? And then we're going to try to develop pathways for solutions. You need to bring it up again. And not that we need a place to park kids, we need to have a developmental.
We need that too.
Yeah, right, because that's important though, and I think we have a unique advantage here in Cedar Valley that we could do something about this. And we have a robust pre-K educational system here in our Cedar Valley that's really quite good. Are we employing it to solve that problem? And that's what we should be looking at. And then what are employers doing to invest in the solving of that problem? So very good,
We
love
have
it.
a group that's working on that. The Blackhawk County Child Care Coalition.
Right.
And I can say that we just recently have been, if you go maybe to the session that talks about the barriers, Mary Jansen will be talking about the partnership that we're working on with employers and our early childhood program, and talking about how we can set up some ways through continuing ed to follow through with a certificate for directorship, and then how that would be funded by groups of employers to make this affordable, because we know that current child care providers are not making enough money to pay for more education and certificates, and we also know that according to the rules, to be a director, you have to have at least 5 years of child care experience. So you can't just take somebody off the street, make them a director of a center with some business classes. That you have to have childcare people that have experience. And so we're really excited about what we're doing. I think the employers that are at the table are setting up a model where, okay, employers, it costs you dollars when your employees turn over because they don't have childcare. And so they've literally gone through and done the math, and we can point out what the dollar loss is, and so then we can say that if you invest in this $500 certificate to have somebody who's currently a child care worker move up to a director, that it's going to be worth it.
We also, I think the coalition is doing great work. I also hope they get to a place where businesses will realize they can partner on this too.
Yes.
So instead of having these standalone one-offs,
Right.
because Kyle Roden and I had this conversation when he was at Master Brand, now he's at CPM Roskamp, but same thing, it's like, why are we trying to do it just for ourselves? Where's the partnership across organizations so that business to business can it's not all on you.
Right.
If we spread that around, it would be very doable as far as the cost side of that. So, let me ask you a question based on this employer conversation now. What, in your opinion, is an employer-based curriculum a possibility?
Absolutely.
I've read a number, and I'm talking about not just, if you're hiring too, there's this discussion about an employer-based curriculum, so.
Well, we're fortunate because we have a group that, as it's called our contract training unit, that goes out and helps businesses on a one-on-one basis develop customized training to help them meet their needs. So we have a whole unit that does this. And I think it's one of those hidden gems here in the Cedar Valley that employers are learning more and more about. You hear the programs 260E and 260F programs. It's the same group that does that, but they go out continuously, talk to businesses, what do you need, do a training plan, go back, develop the curriculum, get it authorized by the employer, and then we find instructors to provide it. So we are doing that. I think it can even be expanded more.
And then, obviously, Chris, with CAPS, that's a big piece of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we've, Andy talked a little bit about it with Visual Logic and what they currently do with when they onboard students. And based on what our students have seen at our locations, we have CAPS Med at Allen, CAPS Met, or engineering at Viking Pump, and CAPS Ed, which is at UNI, and then the business communication design is at UNI as well. We've seen our onboarding process look directly at the human resource process. So our students have went through that. We've got great feedback from our students, some really good and some really not so good about what onboarding looks like in the human resource world. And if there's some opportunity there, like that's where I see it. And I'm not an expert in that field, but just from what our kids are coming back and saying and what the outlook of whether they want to go into this field or not directly correlates with what their experience was in the onboarding of the human resource world. Was, can I see myself culturally in this business, and what was that experience like? And when Andy came in and talked to them about Visual Logics, and that a lot of our interns or our students will go through this process of really training what we do and who we are, our kids were all about it. And then some of the people had to go in the healthcare industry and jump through some of those hoops, and they changed their minds.
So you're saying we should storm the SHRM meeting?
Lisa, what are you thinking?
Where we are in the process of this kind of thing would not necessarily be developing a curriculum specifically for a business, but we're partnering with institutions. I'll give you a good example, a healthcare institution that says, and I go back to medical assistant because there's a huge shortage of medical assistants. They need medical assistants. We partner with a healthcare provider then to go into their facility and do our program for their group of CNAs who have done this. We're doing more and more of those types of partnerships. We're doing more alliance agreements so that if you are an employee at this place, you can come to us for the degree that the employer wants you to get, and you get a discounted, you get to save. We work with your tuition reimbursement. That would be where we are. I will tell you that I think everybody should look at what Guild Education is doing. If you've seen what they are, they just contracted with, are you guys familiar with Guild? They are in Colorado, and what they're doing right now is amazing. They're kind of almost brokering between universities and tuition reimbursement programs with employers. So this is what Walmart just did, if you know. Walmart went in and said, you can get these degrees at these universities, and if you do that, we'll pay. You actually contact Guild Education. And Guild is your admissions, and they also do your student advising through the entire program for these tuition reimbursement. I think those are the places where people are going right now. I know that sounds a little off from where you're talking about, but again, if I'm going to be accredited by the HLC, I can't just go, hey, you can have a degree that looks like this at your company. I don't have that flexibility, so I can only work within those parameters for the employer.
Yeah.
So I'll say, employee-based degree programs, probably, I wouldn't frame it that way, employer-informed programs. So College of Business is a really good example. Advisory groups throughout the curriculum.
Yeah.
Good feedback, good consistent feedback about, are we doing things well? What can we do better? And that's across the university. So, not customized necessarily specifically to one employer, but certainly feedback from a lot of employers in terms of the content and the approaches that we use in our degree programs.
When we get to a place, do you feel like where we're going to look at things like competencies as a metric or awarding credit, awarding degrees?
I've already
They're there.
moving in that
I feel like we're
direction. I think that, in my view, this is my personal opinion.
So competency-based.
Not my institution opinion, this is my personal opinion. I think we need to be careful because, and this is the traditionalist in me, and I went to school a long time ago. I can go to a class and I can, in a competency-based education class, you usually use the resources as you need them. That's the way it's currently designed, and that's beautiful. I probably, master's in English, okay, liberal arts all the way here, okay, so think of it, I could have read Shakespeare, I could have read a lot of secondary sources on Shakespeare, and done probably fine, but what made Shakespeare live for me was the instructor who taught me Shakespeare. And that instructor brought that beautiful life to me. And I believe you can find that in business programs too. That business teacher can really bring that. So I think we need to be very careful about competency-based education. It has value, it has a place, but we don't want to degrade or take away from the learning experience that people have when they're in a group of people in a community with somebody who is an expert and can really speak to things. We could have done this whole conference with you watching a television screen. Would it have been the same experience? It wouldn't have been. So yes, I think it's possible to measure skills by that, but we also need to remember the other parts of education.
I bring it up not because of me, I bring it up because of the government's interest in competency-based.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to be so traditional and sound.
Doug, let's do this then with our last 5 minutes. If you could have one insight or one thought specific to germane to this conversation that you would like to share. I mean, with respect to lifelong learning, all the different ways to, the on-ramps, the off-ramps, the asymmetrical, nonlinear discussions, the importance of pre-K through all the way through 16. I mean, what would you like to say to us that you think is a really important thing to take forward with this conversation?
I'd say my advice always is think holistically and think long-term. I mean, there's a lot of things in higher education that we chase shiny balls around and think this is really cool, gee whiz. But some of the fundamentals, if we compare what employers are asking for and what the workplace needs are and what the outcomes that most universities embrace, they're not far apart. The critical thinking, the problem solving, people skills. I mean, I think we have a big opportunity to develop people skills throughout from pre-K, give a nod to pre-K, kids getting along really good throughout the system. So that's I speak simply, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Awesome.
I want to add a little bit to that. As a person who went through an engineering curriculum in the early 80s, all the things that you're saying today that students need to be able to do, we were told when we graduated, we needed to be able to do those things. We needed to be able to communicate. We needed critical thinking skills. We need blah, 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 blah. It is the same conversation 30 some odd years later, and we continue to have a fundamental issue in measuring and determining exactly what that is.
Yep, that's right.
We still haven't landed on how do we assess whether or not somebody has critical thinking skills. We assess very well whether or not they know something. We don't necessarily assess very well what they can do with what they know. That is very different, and it happens at different stages with different individuals. So we are, in what everything I hear is the exact same things that they were telling us graduating when I graduated in 1982, engineering, Iowa State. Same things are going on.
Yep.
Same issues are going on, and we still haven't found solutions. And on top of that, I was told I was only going to learn 10% of what I needed to know to do a job as an engineer with a 4-year curriculum. We really haven't, I just listened to all this. We haven't moved very far, folks. We're still talking about the same thing.
Awesome.
We haven't moved very far.
Last few minutes, something you would like to share on your mind?
To quote the musical Lavender, if I had my druthers. If I had my druthers, and this is really, I think pie in the sky relates to a lot what you're talking about. If I could change what a university or a high school does, and it involves you in this, it would be really having more student advising. People who are really working individually with students, because whether they're 18 in a traditional university, coming back to school, trying to figure themselves out, We must be able to help students overcome their barriers, overcome their patterns of failure. I've seen so many students who cannot break out of their patterns of failure. It takes skilled, trained people to help students to actually, it's great, have all the programs you want, but if they can't get through the programs, it's useless. And we need more attention paid to those kinds of things than completion rates and admissions and all the other things.
Chris?
I think just think outside the box, which that's what we're here for right now, is what we're doing is, you know, we talk about the traditionalist mindset and things have been similar, but we've got to really make ourselves uncomfortable to figure these things out. And that's going to be making people from business to industry to education change. And that's a hard concept across the board. And we really need to look at what we're doing and can we be doing it differently? And if so, who's willing to take the risk and the leap to do it?
Aaron, you got 30 seconds.
Thank you all for coming out. Now, quit trying to fit students into boxes. That's what we need to do. We need to understand and assess. I couldn't agree with what Lisa and Chris said more. We need to have more advising out there that can really set a person down the right path. Because most of the people that we see coming through our short-term programs are people that went down a path, now they're going down a different path. Let's try to get them on the right path to begin with. So.
Let's take the pen.